The conversation had already gone sideways by the time it really started. Theodora Smith was sitting across from a man she had never met in a room full of strangers under fluorescent lighting that had no business being that aggressive on a Friday evening. She wondered if the awful lightning was intentional, but what did it matter? She already knew she was never attending an event like this again when he looked at her with the most unbothered expression she had ever seen on a human face and said, "I'll be honest with you. I'm not here to perform. I'm not going to spend the next 7 minutes trying to impress you, and I'd rather we both just save the energy." Silence. Theodora stared at him. Not because what he said was offensive, not because it was rude exactly, but because she had walked into this event with that precise speech loaded and ready, word for word. She had rehearsed the tone on the Uber ride over, unbothered, efficient, slightly apologetic, but mostly not. She was going to sit down, establish the terms, and coast through the evening without pretending to be interested in anyone. And this man, this very calm, very composed, very irritating man, had just stolen her lines. She watched him settle back in his chair like he had just resolved something, and something shifted behind her eyes. "I also," she said, with more precision than the sentence required, "have absolutely no interest in impressing you." He looked at her. She looked at him. They both knew what had just happened. She had said it back, in response, which meant it sounded like a reaction, not a position, which was not at all what she intended, and the slight curve at the corner of his mouth told her he had caught every single layer of that. Theodora picked up her glass of water and took a sip she did not need. His name, she would find out in approximately 40 seconds, was Sung Ju-won. He was Korean. He was unhurried in the way that either meant confidence or arrogance, and she hadn't decided which yet, and he was looking at her with the quiet attention of someone who had already found the evening more interesting than expected. She had not, or so she was telling herself. But let's go back. Let's go back to how Theodora Smith ended up in a speed dating event on a Friday night when she had a brief due Monday morning and a perfectly good couch at home. Her name was Theodora. Everyone called her Theo. She had stopped correcting people about it years ago because it simply wasn't a battle worth fighting. She was 31. She was a corporate lawyer at a firm that rewarded exactly the kind of focused, relentless, no-nonsense energy she had been operating on since law school, and she had, by all reasonable measures, built a life she was proud of. Romance had not been part of the architecture. It wasn't that she was opposed to it in theory. She thought about it the same way she thought about redecorating her apartment. Someday, when there was time, when it felt urgent, it had just never felt urgent. And then her sister Nadia had called on a Tuesday with the kind of voice that meant something was coming that Theodora was not going to be able to say no to. "There's a speed dating thing on Friday. I already signed you up." Nadia. "Theo, you haven't been on a single date this year." "I've been busy." "You are always busy. You were busy at Christmas. You were busy at my birthday dinner. You showed up to Mum's thing last month with a contract in your bag." "I reviewed it in the car." Theo. She had gone, not because she thought anything would come of it, but because Nadia had a wedding coming up, and Theodora loved her sister enough to show up to a room full of strangers and be uncomfortable for a few hours. She had dressed well. She always dressed well, that was not negotiable. Sat through 4 previous tables with the kind of polite distance that communicated she was a lovely person who was not here for anything serious, and then she had sat down across from Sung Ju-won, and he had opened his mouth before she could open hers. Back in the present, the timer on the table still had 4 minutes left. 4 minutes was a long time when neither person was performing. "So," Ju-won said, not unkindly, "why are you here?" "My sister," Theodora said. He nodded slowly. "Family pressure." "What about you?" He considered this. "Similar." She looked at him properly for the first time. Really looked. Past the initial irritation. He had the stillness of someone who had learned early that patience was more powerful than urgency. It was, she thought despite herself, not an unattractive quality. "You're not going to ask me what I do?" she said. "You're not going to ask me either," he said. She almost smiled. Almost. "Fair." The timer went off. Neither of them moved to the next table. It was a small act of mutual defiance that neither of them acknowledged, but both of them chose. The event coordinator shot a look in their direction. Theodora poured herself more water. Ju-Wan didn't move. Around them, the room reshuffled, and they sat in the middle of it like two people who had silently agreed that whatever was happening at this table was more interesting than whatever came next. "This is the most I've spoken to men voluntarily in one evening," Theodora said, with the absolute flatness of a confession that was not meant to be endearing. He looked at her with something close to amusement. "How many tables did you do before this?" "4. "And how was that?" "I'd rather not say." He actually smiled then. A small one, but a real one, and Theodora noted it the way she noted things she planned to think about later, quietly, in the back of her mind, filed under nothing important. By the time the event started winding down and people were exchanging numbers with the enthusiasm Theodora had long since accepted would never be her personality, they were still at the same table, and neither of them had made a move toward the exit or toward each other. Ju-Wan picked up his jacket. "I saw a bar 2 streets down." Theodora looked at him. "Not an invitation," he said. "Just information." She stood up, picked up her bag, and walked toward the door. He followed. "If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications because this one is going to have you in your feelings and on the floor laughing at the same time. And if you're a nestie, you already know to buckle up. Now, let's get into it." The bar was exactly the kind of place Theodora would have chosen herself. Low lighting, good music at a respectful volume, and a bartender who didn't ask unnecessary questions. She took that as a sign of nothing in particular and ordered a whiskey sour. Ju-Wan ordered the same without looking at the menu. They sat at the counter because the tables felt too deliberate, too much like a decision. The counter was just 2 people who happened to be in the same place. "So what kind of lawyer?" he said. She turned to look at him. "You said you weren't going to ask." "I said I wasn't going to ask at the event." He picked up his glass. "We're not at the event." She almost argued with that logic, and then decided it wasn't worth it. "Corporate. Mergers and acquisitions, mostly." She tilted her head. "You." "Architecture." She hadn't expected that. She looked at him again, recalibrating slightly, and he caught her doing it. "What did you think?" he said. "I don't know. Finance, maybe." "Because I'm Korean?" "Because you're annoying," she said pleasantly. He laughed. A proper one this time, sudden and unguarded, and it changed his face completely. Theodora looked away first. They talked. That was the part she hadn't planned for. Not the bar, not the whiskey sour, but the talking. Easy, unforced, the kind of conversation that didn't announce itself as good until you were already 40 minutes into it. He asked sharp questions and listened to the answers, which was rarer than it should have been. She found herself saying things she hadn't rehearsed, which she noticed, and kept going anyway, which she also noticed. He had a family event coming up. She got that out of him after her second drink, when the edges of the evening had softened slightly, and they had progressed from professional history to the kind of territory that only came out after dark. "What kind of event?" she said. "The kind where my family introduces me to someone they've already decided I should marry." Theodora set her glass down. "And you're going?" "I'm the eldest son." "That's not an answer." "For my family," he said. "It is." She looked at him for a moment. The bar moved around them, someone laughing too loudly near the back, a couple arguing quietly by the door. And Ju-Wan sat in the middle of it, the same way he had sat in the middle of that speed dating room. Like noise was simply weather. "Nadia's getting married," Theodora said. It came out without a particular destination. "Your sister." "In 4 months. And I am going to spend the entire reception fielding questions about why I'm not next, why I don't have anyone, whether I'm too focused on work, whether I'm lonely." She stopped. "I'm not lonely." "I didn't say you were." "I know. I'm saying it to get ahead of it." He looked at her with that quiet attention again. "How many aunties?" "At the wedding?" She considered. 7 confirmed, 2 probable. "And they all have opinions about your love life." "They have opinions about everything. My love life is just their current project." Ju-Wan turned his glass slowly on the counter. She watched his hands, precise, unhurried. Architect's hands, she thought. That tracked. You need someone convincing, he said. It wasn't a question. I need someone who can hold a conversation and not look terrified in a room full of loud women who will ask him his intentions within 10 minutes of meeting him. And your family event is in 4 months. My sister's wedding. Yes. Mine is in 3 weeks. Theodora looked at him. The whiskey had taken the sharpest edge off everything and left behind something clear and slightly reckless. She was aware of this. She kept going anyway. You need someone who won't perform, she said. Someone who can hold a room without being held. Someone your family will find credible. Someone, he said, who isn't actually trying to marry me. A beat. I have absolutely no interest in marrying you, Theodora said, with the professional sincerity of someone who had just found the most efficient solution to a shared problem. Likewise. So this would be transactional? Entirely. Your event, my sister's wedding. We learn enough about each other to be convincing. We show up, we leave, we never have to see each other again. Juwan extended his hand across the counter. She looked at it. Then she shook it. It was a firm handshake. Of course it was. Theodora Smith, he said like he was learning the name properly for the first time. Sung Juwan, she said. He left first. She finished her drink, put on her coat, and walked out into the kind of night that felt like nothing had changed because nothing technically had. She had solved a problem. That was all. She was good at solving problems. It was the entire point of her. She got home at 11:30, sat on her couch in her going-out clothes, and opened her laptop. The brief was not going to write itself, and whatever had just happened at that bar was already filed neatly underhandled. It was only when she was halfway through the document that she realized she didn't have his number. She stared at the screen. Then she put it out of her mind and kept writing, because she was Theodora Smith, and she did not spiral over men she had just met, and this was fine, and she would figure it out in the morning. She figured it out in the morning. LinkedIn. Because of course a man like that had a LinkedIn that looked like an architectural portfolio, precise and unhurried, and slightly irritating to look at. She sent a connection request with a message that said only, "We forgot the logistical part." Professional. Clean. Exactly how she intended. He accepted within the hour. I noticed, he replied. And then, a moment later, Are you free Thursday evening? She was not free Thursday evening. She had a client call at 6 and a dinner with her firm's senior partner that she had been rescheduling for 2 weeks. She moved the dinner. She would think about why she did that later. Later came and went, and she decided not to think about it at all. Thursday it was. Thursday evening, Theodora arrived at the restaurant she had chosen. Neutral territory, good acoustics, nowhere near her office, with a notebook. Ju-Wan looked at the notebook. I have 7 aunties, she said, sitting down. 2 of them will ask you questions you are not prepared for. 1 of them will try to feed you before you've sat down. 1 of them doesn't speak much, but she watches everything, and she will report back. You need to know all of them before you meet any of them. He settled into his chair with the expression of a man who had walked into a briefing and was adjusting expectations accordingly. You made notes. I made a system. She opened the notebook. Auntie Bose, eldest. Asks direct questions, doesn't accept vague answers. If she likes you, she'll call you by your name. If she doesn't, she'll call you this one. Do not let her call you this one. Understood. Auntie Cynthia. Brings food to every occasion, including ones where food is already provided. Accept everything she offers. Everything. I don't care if you're full. Everything. Auntie Grace. Quiet. Sits in the corner. Sees all. She's the most dangerous one in the room. Theodora looked up. She's also the one who will like you most if you acknowledge her directly. Most people don't. Ju-Wan nodded slowly. He was taking this seriously. She had wondered if he would, and he was, which she noted and moved past quickly. They went through all 7. He asked sharp, specific questions, clarifying, not stalling. By the end of the notebook, he had a cleaner mental map of her family than some people who had known them for years. and Theodora had the strange and slightly uncomfortable feeling of having been listened to very carefully. "Your turn," she said, closing the notebook. His family briefing was shorter and more precise. His mother, Mrs. Sung, was traditional, observant, and deeply invested in the shape of his future. His father deferred to her on personal matters. There was a younger brother, Ju Hyun, who was easier and would probably find the whole arrangement quietly amusing. The family event was a dinner. Formal, at his parents' home, expectations running underneath every sentence like a current. "What does your mother want from whoever you bring?" Theodora asked. "Composure," he said. "She wants to see how someone holds themselves when they're being assessed." "I hold myself fine under assessment." "I know," he said. Just that, like it wasn't a compliment, just an observation. And somehow, that was worse. The dinner was 3 weeks away. Theodora had a case going to review in 2 weeks, and a client who had started sending emails at midnight, which was a boundary conversation she was going to have very soon. The arrangement fit neatly into the margins of her real life. That was exactly how she wanted it. She told herself that on the drive home. She believed it for about 11 days. The Sunday before his family dinner, she was in the middle of reviewing documents when her phone rang, and it was Nadia. "Come for lunch." "I'm working." "Theo, Mum made rice." She went for lunch. This was how Nadia always won. She had not planned to mention Ju-won. She had planned to eat, survive the usual gentle interrogation about her schedule, and leave by 3. But Auntie Bose was there. Early, because Auntie Bose was always early. And within 4 minutes of Theodora sitting down, she was being looked at with the particular focus of a woman who had known her since birth, and had developed very good instincts. "You look different," Auntie Bose said. "I look exactly the same." "You look like someone who has something she's not saying." Theodora's mother looked up from the kitchen. Nadia, who had been pretending to set the table, went very still. "I've been busy," Theodora said. "You're always busy. This is different. Busy." Auntie Bose tilted her head. "Is it a man?" "It's a case." "Theo," Nadia said. Theodora looked at her sister. Nadia had the expression she had worn since childhood, when she already knew the answer to something, and was waiting to see if Theodora would tell the truth. It was an extremely irritating expression. "There's someone," Theodora said, with the energy of a person surrendering a minor chess piece to protect the board. "It's early. It's nothing formal." The room changed temperature immediately. Her mother came out of the kitchen, Auntie Cynthia, who had been entirely in. The kitchen until this moment materialized in the doorway. Auntie Bose sat forward. "What does he do?" her mother said. "Architecture." "Where is he from?" "He's Korean." A beat. Then Nadia, who had been pretending to set the table, went very still. "You're always busy. This is different busy." Auntie Bose tilted her head. "Is it a man?" "It's a case." "Theo," Nadia said. Theodora looked at her sister. Nadia had the expression she had worn since childhood, when she already knew the answer to something and was waiting to see if Theodora would tell the truth. It was an extremely irritating expression. "There's someone," Theodora said, with the energy of a person surrendering a minor chess piece to protect the board. "It's early. It's nothing formal." The room changed temperature immediately. Her mother came out of the kitchen. Auntie Cynthia, who had been entirely in the kitchen until this moment, materialized in the doorway. Auntie Bose sat forward. "What does he do?" her mother said. "Architecture." "Where is he from?" "He's Korean." A beat. The room absorbed this. Then everyone started talking at the same time. "Bring him," Auntie Bose said, cutting cleanly through everything else. "Next Sunday, we'll make our own assessment." This was not the plan. The plan was his family dinner first, controlled exposure, Theodora managing the variables. Her family on a random Sunday with 12 hours' notice was not a controlled variable situation. She texted Ju-won from the bathroom. "Change of plan. My family wants to meet you next Sunday. You don't have to. This wasn't the agreement." He replied in 4 minutes. "Send me the address." She stared at the message. "You haven't even met them yet," she typed back. "I have your notes," he replied. She stood in her mother's bathroom holding her phone and feeling something she couldn't immediately categorize, which was unusual for her. She categorized things quickly. It was a professional skill that had crossed over into her personal life and served her well. She put her phone away and went back to the table. "He's coming Sunday," she said. Auntie Cynthia nodded with great satisfaction. Auntie Bose said nothing, which meant she was already preparing. Nadia looked at Theodora for a long moment, the particular look of a younger sister who had been watching her older sister her entire life and had just seen something new. "He said yes immediately," Nadia said quietly while the others were talking. "He's just being cooperative." Nadia turned back to her food. "Okay, Theo." Theodora did not like the way she said okay. He arrived on Sunday at exactly the time she had given him, which she had expected, carrying a small box of pastries, which she had not. Theodora met him at the door before anyone else could get there first. She looked at the box. "You brought food." "Auntie Cynthia," he said simply. She stared at him. He had remembered. From one Thursday evening and a notebook he had taken seriously enough to actually absorb, he had remembered that Auntie Cynthia expressed love through feeding people, and the fastest way into her confidence was to arrive having already thought of her. Theodora took the box from him without a word and opened the door. The noise hit immediately. Her mother's house on a Sunday was a particular kind of organized chaos that had its own weather system. Something was always on the stove, someone was always mid-sentence, and the television was always on at a volume that suggested nobody was actually watching it. Ju-Wan stepped into it and she watched his face, just briefly, just to see, and he didn't flinch. He took it in, recalibrated, steadied. She turned before he could catch her watching. Auntie Bose found them first, which was not a surprise because Auntie Bose always found people first. She looked at Ju-Wan with the full, unhurried assessment of a woman who had been reading people since before Theodora was born. "You're the architect," she said. "Yes, ma'am." Sung Ju-Wan. A flicker of something, not surprise, just acknowledgement. "You know my name." "Theo mentioned you." Auntie Bose said it like a statement and a question at the same time, which was a skill Theodora had never been able to replicate. "Come, sit." It was a command dressed as an invitation. Ju-Wan followed without hesitation. Theodora watched him sit across from Auntie Bose and engage, genuinely engage, not perform, not deflect, and felt something loosen slightly in her chest that she immediately told to behave itself. Auntie Cynthia emerged from the kitchen, saw the pastry box in Theodora's hands, looked at Ju-Wan, and pointed at him with a wooden spoon. "You brought that." "I did." "Good." She nodded like he had passed a test she hadn't announced. "You're eating twice today." "I was counting on it," he said. Auntie Cynthia laughed, a big whole-body laugh, and went back into the kitchen. Theodora heard her telling someone in there that he was a good one and felt her stomach do something she refused to name. Lunch was loud and warm and relentless. Her mother asked questions with the graceful persistence of someone who had been a parent for 31 years and had developed sophisticated extraction techniques. Ju-Wan answered everything directly, never overselling, never retreating. He asked her mother about herself, her work, her garden, the trip she had mentioned wanting to take, and listened in the way that made people feel they were the most interesting person in the room. Theodora was watching this while pretending to focus on her food. Nadia was watching Theodora watch this, which was significantly more dangerous. It was during the second round of food, because there was always a second round, this was non-negotiable in this house, that Auntie Cynthia settled into the chair beside Ju-Wan with the contentment of a woman who had just fed someone adequately and was now ready to talk. She looked at him. Then she looked at Theodora. Then she looked back at him with the serene, unbothered energy of someone who had simply decided to say the thing she was thinking. "You know," Auntie Cynthia said, "her type has never been white chocolate." The table went quiet. Not the whole room. The television was still going. Something was still simmering in the kitchen. But the people at the table went quiet with the particular quality of people trying very hard not to react. Theodora set her fork down. Ju-Wan was still for exactly 1 second. Then he looked at Auntie Cynthia and gave her his most charming smile, and even added a wink for good measure. "Is that a problem?" Auntie Cynthia blinked. Then she laughed, delighted. No, no problem at all. I'm just saying. She patted his hand. White chocolate is still chocolate. Nadia had her hand over her mouth. Theodora's mother was looking at the ceiling. Theodora was staring at her plate with the focused expression of someone reading a very important document. Juwan leaned slightly toward Theodora. White chocolate, he said quietly. Just for her. With the ghost of a smile she felt more than saw. Do not, she said without looking up. I'm just noting it for the record. Juwan. Theodora. Nadia made a sound that was definitely not a cough this time. He passed. That was the only word for it. By the time the afternoon wound down and Juwan had helped clear plates over her mother's protests and been given enough food to take home that it required a separate bag, Auntie Bose pulled Theodora aside in the hallway with the quiet authority she reserved for things that actually mattered. He's steady, Auntie Bose said. It's early, Theodora said. Auntie Bose looked at her for a long moment. He calls you Theodora. It's my name. Everyone calls you Theo. Theodora didn't answer. Auntie Bose nodded slowly, like she had just confirmed something she had suspected since he walked in, and went back to the living room. His family dinner was the following Friday. Theodora wore something precise and understated, a structured dress in deep burgundy that said, I am taking this seriously, without saying anything at all. She had done her research in the week between, not because she was nervous, she told herself, but because preparation was simply what she did. She arrived at his parents' home with her back straight and her mind clear and the composure she brought to every difficult room. Mrs. Sung was elegant and watchful in equal measure, exactly as Juwan had described. She greeted Theodora with the measured warmth of a woman reserving full judgment for after dinner, which Theodora respected enormously. His father was quieter, observant in a way that reminded her of Auntie Grace. Ju Yun, the younger brother, shook her hand and then looked at Juwan with an expression that clearly said, Really? And then looked back at Theodora with an expression that said, actually, fair enough. Dinner was formal, and the conversation was precise. Mrs. Sung asked about her work, her cases, her firm, where she saw herself in 5 years. Theodora answered everything clearly and without apology, the way she did in every professional room, and watched something shift incrementally in Mrs. Sung's bearing as the evening progressed. Not warmth, exactly, but the specific kind of respect one composed woman extended to another. What she did not expect was Mrs. Sung turning to her son near the end of the evening and saying, in Korean, something short and quiet. Ju Hyun looked at his plate. Ju Won answered evenly. In the car afterward, Theodora said, What did she say? A pause. She said you were more than she expected. Theodora looked out the window. The city moved past in lights and motion, and she sat in the quiet of his car and felt the shape of the evening settle around her. That's a good thing, she said, not quite asking. From my mother, he said, it's the best thing. The debrief, as she had started thinking of it, happened at his apartment. It had become their habit after each event, a winding down, a quiet recap, the particular ease of being with someone who had just been through the same thing you had. His apartment was clean and considered, full of architecture books and good light, and Theodora had stopped pretending she didn't feel comfortable there after the third visit. She was on his couch with her heels off, and a glass of wine she was actually tasting rather than just holding when he came and sat beside her. Closer than usual, not dramatically, just the natural distance of two people who had stopped measuring it. Your mother's going to keep expecting to see me, she said. Yes. That complicates things. It does. She turned to look at him, and he was already looking at her, which happened more often than the arrangement had originally accounted for. The lamp behind him made everything warm and close, and she thought about saying something practical. About timelines, about exit strategies, about how they would eventually walk this back. She didn't say any of that. What happened was quiet and unannounced, and had the feeling of something that had been making its way toward them for weeks. He leaned in. She didn't move away. And then he kissed her. Not urgently, not like a question, but with the same steadiness he brought to every room he walked into, and she kissed him back before she had made a single decision about it. It lasted long enough to matter, and then they both went still. Theodora looked at the middle distance. Her mind, which was usually her most reliable instrument, had gone briefly and completely quiet. "That wasn't part of the arrangement," she said. "No," he said. "So we should probably. Neither of them moved. She finished her wine. He didn't say anything else, and she appreciated that more than she could articulate because she needed the silence to figure out what was happening inside her chest, which was something she could normally do quickly and efficiently, and was currently taking much longer than it should. She left 20 minutes later. He walked her to the door and said her name, Theodora, the same way he always said it, like it meant something specific, and she nodded without turning back and took the stairs. In the car, she sat for a moment before starting the engine. She was not going to run. That was the thing she knew about herself. When things got real and uncontrolled and asked more of her than she had planned to give, her instinct was to file it away, step back, create distance, return to the version of her life that she could predict. She had done it before. She knew exactly how it would feel to do it now. She also knew it would be wrong. She sat in the quiet of the car and made the decision slowly and without drama. She was Theodora Smith. She had walked into rooms that were designed to intimidate her and held her ground. She had built a career on staying in difficult positions until they resolved in her favor. She was not going to run from a man who called her by her full name and remembered which auntie to bring pastries for. She started the engine. She was going to see this through. Nadia called on Tuesday. Not a text, a call, which meant she had something to say that required her actual voice, which meant Theodora was already preparing herself before she even answered. "Hey," she said. "I need you to come over," Nadia said. "Just you. No case files." Theodora went. Nadia's apartment was the opposite of her own, warm and slightly cluttered in the way of someone who had filled their space with living rather than order. There were wedding things everywhere now, fabric swatches and seating charts, and a mood board on the dining table that had been growing for months. Nadia made tea without asking, and set it in front of Theodora, and then sat across from her with the particular stillness she only deployed when she was serious. "Talk to me," Nadia said. "About what?" "Theo. I'm fine." "I didn't ask if you were fine. I asked you to talk to me." Nadia wrapped her hands around her mug. "I've been watching you my whole life. I know what you look like when you're managing something, and I know what you look like when something is managing you. Last Sunday was the second one." Theodora looked at her tea. "He called you Theodora," Nadia said. 3 times. "And every single time you didn't correct him. You didn't even try." She paused. "You correct everyone. It's my name. Theo. I have called you Theo since I could talk. Mum calls you Theo. Auntie Bose, who does not compromise on anything, calls you Theo." Nadia tilted her head. "This man called you Theodora at a Sunday lunch with the aunties, and you looked like you didn't mind at all." Theodora was quiet for a long moment. The thing about Nadia was that she had never needed Theodora to be perfect. She had just always needed her to be honest, and Theodora had spent 31 years being better at the first than the second. "Something happened," Theodora said finally. Nadia waited. "At his apartment, after his family dinner." "What kind of something?" "The kind I didn't plan for." Nadia set her mug down slowly. "Theo, did he kiss you, or did you kiss him?" "It was simultaneous." Nadia closed her eyes briefly with the expression of someone receiving news they had already suspected, but still needed a moment to absorb. Then she opened them. "And then what did you do?" "I left." "Of course you did." "But I didn't run," Theodora said, and something in her voice made Nadia go still. "I wanted to. I sat in the car and I knew exactly how to make it neat, how to text him something professional in the morning, how to create some distance, how to file it away and come back to the version of things I could predict." She looked at her sister. "I didn't." Nadia looked at her for a long moment. Then her face did something soft and complicated that Theodora hadn't seen in years. "You actually like him," Nadia said. Not teasing, just true. "I don't know what I—" "Theo." Theodora exhaled. Yes. Nadia reached across the table and covered her hand with hers. Said nothing. Just held it, the way she had done when they were small, and Theodora had refused to cry about something that deserved crying about, and Nadia had understood that some things were better held than spoken. They drank their tea. The wedding mood board watched them from the table. Outside, the city was doing its usual indifferent, continuous thing. "He's coming to the wedding," Nadia said eventually. That was the arrangement. "Theo," Nadia smiled, "he's coming to my wedding. Let it be what it is." She didn't hear from him for 3 days, which was unusual. They had developed a rhythm without naming it. A message here, a check-in there, the kind of low hum of contact that had become part of her daily texture without her noticing when it started. 3 days of quiet felt loud. On the 4th day, she texted him. "Are you alive?" He replied in 2 minutes. Alive, thinking. About. A pause. Longer than his usual response time. "You, mostly." Theodora read it twice. Then she put her phone face down on her desk and stared at her screen for 30 seconds before picking it back up. "That's inconvenient," she typed. "I know," he replied. And then, "Can I see you this week?" She looked at her calendar. She had a filing deadline Thursday, a client call Friday morning, and Nadia's final dress fitting Saturday that she had promised months ago. "Wednesday," she typed. Wednesday. He came to her apartment for the first time on Wednesday evening, which felt like a different kind of line to cross than all the others. She had ordered food, and he brought wine, and they sat at her table with the ease of people who had been doing this much longer than they had, and for a while they just talked. About his current project, about a case she was close to resolving, about nothing in particular and everything underneath it. It was after dinner, when the food was cleared and the wine was almost gone, and the city outside her window had gone dark and quiet, that he said it. "I should tell you something." She looked at him. "I went to that speed dating event with no intention of finding anything real." He turned his glass slowly on the table, that habit she had come to recognize, the one that meant he was choosing his words carefully. "And then you told me you had spoken to more men that evening than you had in years, and the way you said it, just completely without apology, I thought, this person is exactly what I didn't know I was looking for." Theodora was very still. "I'm not saying this to complicate things," he said. "I know you value your life the way it is. I know your work is not a footnote, it's the whole book, and I would never want you to change that. I'm saying it because I think you should know where I am." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not pretending anymore, Theodora. I'm not sure I have been for a while." The room was very quiet. She had spent her career learning how to hold difficult rooms, how to stay present inside pressure without letting it move her off her position. She sat with what he had just said and let it settle. Let it be real. Let it take up the space it deserved instead of immediately filing it somewhere manageable. "I'm not pretending either," she said. He looked at her. "I'm terrified," she said, with the precision she brought to every honest thing. "I'm very good at my life, and I've built it exactly the way I wanted it, and you are. You are not something I planned for, and that is genuinely inconvenient." She held his gaze. "But I'm not going anywhere." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Didn't say anything, just held it. She let him. Nadia's wedding was on a Saturday in April, when the weather couldn't decide between spring and something warmer, and eventually settled into the kind of soft gold afternoon that felt specifically designed for occasions that mattered. Theodora wore deep green and had her hair up and walked into the venue with Ju-won beside her, feeling, for the first time in a long time, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be without having planned it that way. The ceremony was beautiful, and Nadia was radiant in the particular way of someone who had known exactly what they wanted and waited for it without compromise. And when Theodora caught her sister's eye halfway through the vows, Nadia gave her a look that said "see" in the specific language that only the two of them spoke fluently. The reception was everything Theodora had braced herself for and more. The aunties were in full formation. Auntie Bose held court at her table. Auntie Grace sat in her corner and saw everything. And Auntie Cynthia, who had been circulating with the energy of a woman who had been waiting for this day and was going to extract every drop of it, found them at their table midway through the evening, and sat down beside Ju-Wan with her champagne and her unbothered expression, and patted his hand again. "You came back," she said approvingly. "I did," Ju-Wan said. Auntie Cynthia looked between them with the serenity of a woman who considered herself personally responsible for this outcome. "I knew the first Sunday. Some things you just know." She got up and drifted away. Ju-Wan watched her go and then turned to Theodora with a perfectly straight face. "White chocolate," he said quietly. Theodora pressed her lips together very hard. "If you say another word—" "Still chocolate, though." She laughed. She didn't mean to. It came out fully and without warning, real and unguarded, the kind of laugh she didn't produce for audiences. He watched it happen with the expression of someone storing it carefully. "I like when you do that," he said. "I know," she said. "Don't make a thing of it." "Noted." He leaned slightly closer. "Theodora." "What?" "Nothing. Just—" A pause, quiet and warm. "It fits you. The whole name. It always did." She looked at him for a moment in the soft gold light of her sister's wedding, with the aunties in full orbit around them, and Nadia on the dance floor, and the whole warm, chaotic machinery of her family doing what it always did, and she thought about the fluorescent lights of a speed dating event, and a man who had stolen her lines, and a bar 2 streets away, and a handshake that had turned into something neither of them had a clean word for yet. She thought about sitting in her car and choosing not to run. "Ju-Wan," she said, "ask me to dance." He stood and extended his hand, and she took it. And the deal that had started as a solution to 2 separate problems became the truest thing either of them had done in years. And that, Nesties, is where we leave Theodora Smith, a woman who built a life worth keeping and found someone steady enough to walk into it without asking her to change a single thing. If this story did something to your chest today, you know what to do. Like, share, and drop a comment telling me, was the deal ever really just a deal? Because I don't think it was. Not from that first table. If you're new here, welcome home. Hit subscribe and come find out why the Nesties don't leave. And to my Nesties who have been here from the beginning, you already knew how this one was going to end, didn't you? See you in the next story.